How can we convince more small business owners and restaurant owners to make changes that would better help the consumers?
It's impossible to ban seed oils.
What do you think about the constant summer signals?
Can you wiggle your ears?
Can you talk about mental health and mental clarity?
All right, guys. Welcome. You're not supposed to clap at the beginning of the podcast. I haven't said anything yet.
We might both in.
I know, right? We'll see what happens at the end. If the applause at the end isn't better, then I didn't do a very good job. Welcome to the end of the Animal-Based Gathering. It's so good to have you guys here. So this podcast is going to be on YouTube. It's going to be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So anybody that asks a question has a chance to be famous or infamous. And all of you guys are going to be in a video, which is amazing. But for those who are listening to the podcast who are not here with us in Ubita, Costa Rica, we have about 120 of you brave souls that came down here. We're sitting in a lookout looking at the Pacific Ocean and these huge waves that are here right now. And we've just had essentially 3.5 days together, surfing, swimming, jumping in waves, body surfing, scavenger hunting, floating down rivers, almost drowning. But the best part is that, like I said, no one died, but I think we definitely pushed the limits this weekend. And so at the end, it's been fun. So this is the third Animal-Based Gathering, the best one we've ever had. You know, my sister, Mary Catherine, deserves a ton of credit. So Emily was here from Heart and Soil, and she took off already, but she also was helping my sister. So we'll give her a round of applause in absentia. I'm excited to have my niece and nephew here. Where are Luke and Michaela? Yeah, me. Where's Michaela? Michaela, give us a bigger, get your hand up more than that. Yeah, that's what's up. And I'm excited to have all you guys here. I've got some of my team here. Zach is our incredible filmer. He does a lot of my filming for all the content you guys see online. He's the art editor. Where's Martin? Martin is back there. Martin is my brand manager. And then Jimmy Beef. Where's Jimmy Beef? Jimmy is over in the corner there. Jimmy is the OG brand manager and now works at Lineage. So I'm not missing anybody, am I? Well, Stephen, my brother-in-law, is there. He's been doing the support. And I'll just say a few words before we get into the podcast. Like I said, this is the third Animal-Based Gathering that we've done, and it's incredible. You guys are all so amazing. I've heard so many stories, so many incredible transformations. It's just what I do is challenging. I think all of what we do is everything that we do is challenging, but I find unique challenges in being in this online space where people can make negative comments. And as a human, I think we don't always pay attention to the positive comments in the same salience as we do with the negative comments. And so negative comments affect me more online, which is why I have a team that sort of protects me from this kind of thing. But when I meet you guys in person and you tell me your stories and how this way of eating or this community or, you know, the supplements or any of the products or anything has affected you positively, it means the world to me. So thank you all for coming and sharing your stories with me. It really does mean more to me than you will ever know, because this is the fuel that I need to keep going and doing this. And I hope that all of you are also inspiring each other. And so you can find the same sort of fuel in your own lives to share your stories or do whatever you do in your daily life, whether it's in the health space or not. And so that's what's cool about this. There's so much disconnect in our world today. We're overly technologized, we're overly digitized. And I just think it's been so cool. I mean, every one of these events I've done, I just think we have to do another one. And you guys always make it special. There's no application process. There was no selection, but here we are with 120 amazing freaking humans with all sorts of ages. You know, we have young kids here. We have people that brought their families. We have folks up into their multiple decades of life, and we're all thriving and we're all vital, and it's amazing. So it's just awesome to see this, and it humbles me every time, and we'll keep doing it. And so we're going to do another Animal-Based Gathering next year. Mary Catherine, what dates do we say? We can say it at the end of the podcast too, but I want to let you guys all know. And so what's going to happen with this in the future is that we're probably not going to make it much bigger because we can't get a single more person into that river. And we already kind of maxed out all the boats going places. And so we're going to keep it, below Dunbar's number, which is the number of a tribe. There's this number that's been studied by anthropologists that when you get over 150, the tribe splits off. So I think this one is about 120. We had a day where a men's mastermind group joined us and we were a little bit bigger, but we're going to try and keep it about the same size. So the good news is that you guys are all grandfathered in and you're the VIPs for the future gatherings, which means that if you want to come back, you'll get the first notice. But every year we'll keep doing this. Yeah. And we may do it, twice a year. We'll see. But Mary Catherine's begging me not to do another one this year, so we'll do it next year. Are we thinking the March dates?
April 30th through May 5th, 2026, and then March 25th through March 30th, 2027. So we want to try to get ahead and start booking future years out to plan.
Yeah, so we're gonna do so. We'll announce the dates more formally, but I guess it's April what?
April 30th would be like a Thursday, so it's like that weekend.
Through May.
May 5th.
Okay, so April 30th through May 5th, 2026. We'll see you guys there. And then we're going to move it to March the 2027. And maybe in 2026, we'll have a second one, but we'll see. But I think this is like really important. And as I said at the beginning of the gathering, when I rolled in sort of sleepy-eyed from San Jose and Washington, D.C., I think that the broader vision here, there's a specific vision for this weekend, and that's for all of you to be able to connect with like-minded people. And it's specifically not overscheduled, right? We're not teaching. I'm not trying to teach or, have a seminar. I mostly just want to get people together who are humans and like to be here and do these sorts of things, be in nature and ground and be outside and eat good food. And I want you guys to all connect with each other. That's why it's called a gathering and not a seminar. And so the specific goal for this weekend is for you guys to do that. But the broader goal is to try and create something here in Uvita because I live here. This is my home. And I think I want to stay here. And so I want people to come back here. I want people to feel comfortable here. And we'll see where it goes and where it grows and how it evolves. But I hope that people will come back. I hope you guys will all stay connected on the Discord in other ways. And we'll see if we can host little micro gatherings in between. I mean, I've never been to Burning Man, but some of my friends like Zach is a huge burner. And there's I've heard there are these after burn events. I think after you come to an event like this, there's a huge community and there's bound to be a letdown. Like, where did my tribe go? So I think that the solution is you should all just move here and we'll all be it'll be great. Just no one leave. And if you leave, just make sure you come back in the next few weeks. Problem solved. But failing that, maybe we'll do micro events or we'll figure out how to do it throughout the year. But I do want to create sort of a lasting community here. Maybe we'll be able to buy some sort of a space here or create a space where people can come and hang out. But I want to make my vision, one of my visions is to make this part of Costa Rica, Uvita, Dominical, a space for animal-based eating. And that just really means, people that want to be outside and live and ground and appreciate where we've come from as humans and like to eat meat, because I think that does give us some sort of a heading in the world. And I'm realizing that there's one more group of people we should thank, which is La Cusinga, because they have done a stellar job. So, I don't know if Leilani is around. Leilani, maybe she is, or we'll give her a shout out tonight too. But she's really been the representative from La Cusinga, and they've been incredible. I mean, we'll thank Seguros also because they've done lots of the catering and they've catered all the events at my house and so much of the food. But I mean, round of applause for Leilani and Cusinga. Thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, it's really been, I've even been blown away. I mean, my sister's amazing. She did a great job organizing this, but when I've walked around and seen the dinners and we were out on boats yesterday morning and they brought us food wrapped in banana leaves, I thought, wow. I really appreciate the care with which all of the support staff at Cusinga and Seguros kind of work together to create something that's uniquely ours. Because as you guys know, this lifestyle, it just goes beyond the food you eat. It's like, what about plastic and what about light and what about grounding? And so what a cool place to be able to do it. And I've really been blown away at how well all the people around us that supported us have come together to create this unique experiences. I think I've told a lot of you guys this, but about a week and a half ago, I had this panic that I wasn't going to be able to hang out at night because the lights were all going to be blue. And my sister somehow found 30 red light bulbs. And next year we'll have the whole restaurant will be red too. So it'll be this whole red out at night. But that's the idea that I want to create as much of a cohesive experience from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, and even while you're sleeping, while you're here, just to give people a sense of what this is really about. So anyway, with that said, we'll start the Q&A podcast. The way this is going to work is, Mary Catherine, what time is it? Anybody have the time? 3:30.
Yeah.
We'll probably go for about an hour. So we'll try 60 solid minutes of Q&A. Anybody can ask a question. You can ask me anything. and we'll just riff and we'll record it. Like I said, it'll go on YouTube and let's roll. So be brave, guys. Come up, ask a question. You don't even have to raise your hand. Just the mic is right there. Just stand up and ask. And, if you guys want to line up, you can, or just, I'll let you guys figure it out. But I'm excited to hear the questions, and let's go.
Hey, Paul, thanks again for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so I'd love to learn more about the presidential invite and whether it's impossible to ban seed oils. And also, what does your America utopia look like?
Okay, great question. Great question. So yeah, most of you guys know that on Thursday of last week, I was in Washington, D.C. at the White House for this Make America Healthy Again announcement. And I did get to sit down with Bobby for about 15 minutes. And I kind of said that to him. I said, we can't make seed oils illegal. And he said, no, but the sense I got from him was that HHS, so Health and Human Services, and the FDA are both intending to litigate some of the most harmful components out of food. And I think that what we do and what I do is a bottom-up approach. I'm trying to educate people and help people get more of a perspective on how to make healthy choices. And you are all a huge part of that as you go out from here and talk to your friends and family, and the message spreads, and hopefully that improves human health. But I think that the White House quoted me saying this, which was kind of cool, on X. And this really is legitimately the first time within my lifetime, and certainly within my medical career, that I've ever seen an administration intentionally embrace looking for the root cause of illness. And we'll see how much I can be a part of it and how much they let specific doctors be a part of it. And hopefully we can advise senators and, congressmen and women and members of the cabinet and Bobby on where we should go. It's a tricky problem, right? It's a very tricky problem. I think the food dyes is a start because it sends a signal to the processed food companies. Is red 40 and yellow 5, are these the main cause of chronic illness in this country? Probably not. They're not healthy for humans, though. There's plenty of good evidence that they do create behavioral problems in kids. And I think the more of these sort of synthetic ingredients we get out of our food at large, the better we're going to do. My overarching perspective here is that the FDA is really ground zero because of this generally recognized as safe standard. So the GRAS standards have just been abused over the last 50 years. And I mean, now I'm directly connected with Marty Makary, the head of the FDA, and I got to do a 20-minute podcast with Kyle Diamantis, the deputy director of food safety at the FDA. I believe that's his title. And so they're in my phone. I can text them. And so I think that the fact that influencers, physicians like myself, have direct access to some of the highest levels of the FDA bodes very well, and we'll see where it goes. But I think it ends up, I'm not totally confident that the government can do it all, right? There's only so much litigation. Most of it has to come from people making intentional choices. But I think that the signs are good. Yeah, I'm optimistic. Let's see.
Hey, Paul. I was wondering from a quantum biology perspective, what you think about the constant summer signals of having fruit all year long without any breaks.
Yeah.
Because, as like fruit are broken down into electrons that go into the complex one of mitochondria, they produce superoxide continuously. And I was wondering if you're worried about that in terms of also like glycation of other things like proteins and LDL, or any other issues with autophagy not happening, not getting that signal, at least periodically, from like something like a carnivore diet periodically, or like fasting for a few days at a time.
Yeah, great question. Did Jack Cruz send you?
Yes.
We have an interloper. No, this is an interesting question. A couple people asked me that over the course of this weekend. So the first level of answer to this question is that I basically live in endless summer because I live in the tropics, right? So I think humans evolved here, and this is where our biology began. I mean, I spent time with the Hadza in Africa, and Tanzania is essentially the same latitude below the equator to the south. And so I think that it's pretty clear that humans began in a place like this, within 10 degrees north or south of the equator. So our biology was shaped by endless summer. Now, whether that means we should always have endless summer now remains to be seen. But I think for me personally, I choose to live in these places. I may spend a little bit of time in Miami, but I'm not going to get much further from the equator. So I don't think about it much, because if I'm going to places that are further from the equator, like Washington, D.C., they're such a micro journey that it's not a big deal for me. I think people who live in Seattle or other climates might experiment with this. And I think that the best signals you're going to get are your own biology, how you sleep, your libido, your mood, your body composition, and you can get labs. And I think that in terms of lab studies, The simplest ones to look at are metrics of metabolism, metrics of insulin sensitivity, like fasting insulin. And those will be mirrored in your own personal biology. You'll see it in your body fat composition and all these other things. Maybe the hormones, testosterone, estradiol, SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin. And I think thyroid is important to look at also. So whenever people are talking about fasting and then removal of carbohydrates, I just think it's important that you watch your thyroid and your body temperature. And who knows if we need to drop our body temperature and turn down our metabolism at times. I think these remain unanswered questions in the level of like really, really granular molecular medicine or quantum biology. But my concern for a lot of people with keto, strict carnivore, or fasting is that you will see the thyroid hormones go in the wrong direction and you will see body temp go down. So there are some pretty well-known longevity fitness influencers who are quite pale. I won't list any names, but this human has boasted about a body temperature of 96 point something, right? 96.3 or 96.7. And I think that's not something to boast about, right? Like you don't want to boast about your glacial body temperature. That to me is an indication that your body is slowing down and that your metabolism is slowing down. And I think that I tend to lean more toward this sort of Ray Peat perspective, that you want your body temperature to be high and you want your thyroid to be basically happy and partying all the time. You want the thermostat turned up in your house and you want to see your TSH low, certainly below 2. You want to see free T3 and free T4 robustly in the middle of the reference range, not at the low end of the reference range. And you want to see reverse T3 low, and you want to see obviously your antibodies non-existent, which is sort of a different conversation. But I think that it's going to be individual, and I would experiment with it. And I think we need more people to sort of bring us the data and let us know what they think about this, and go from there. Where do you live?
I live in France right now.
So it's pretty far from the equator.
Yeah, like 43 degrees north.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty far, because we are sitting at 9.
Yeah.
9, right? That's a world of difference, right? 43 versus 9. What do you experience for yourself?
I've gone all over the world trying different places, and I find that a cyclic approach works really well.
Mm-hmm.
I worry that like being in the summers environment too much can cause issues with like ferroptosis and lack of autophagy that can like you kind of need to like turn over the mitochondria more.
Mm-hmm. Are you of the perspective that it's actually beneficial for humans to travel to northern climates at times to get that sort of winter?
Maybe simulating it more, but more the idea that, we go through natural like rain seasons here and you have a lack of maybe fruit for a while, or you'd have to fast because you don't find any food. And because a lot of modern fruit is way bigger than it normally would be.
Sure.
That the signal is actually much lower to still get that insulin response that you need from all the sweating and all the electrolyte loss here that leads to the stuff like heart palpitations and, thyroid issues and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, that was my personal experience when I was living in San Diego and whatnot. Doing keto led to massive electrolyte insufficiency. For those that aren't aware, ferroptosis is a word that refers to sort of lipid peroxidation induced cell death. So autophagy is programmed cell death, but ferroptosis is ferrous is a word that means iron. So it's a oxidative stress driven cell death. And it's actually kind of an interesting segue to conversations about seed oils, because there are certain components in animal foods, specifically odd chain fatty acids like C15 and C17 that are in dairy fat and butter, which we've traditionally been told are bad for us, that protect against ferroptosis. So anyway, I don't want to get too far afield, but yeah, it's interesting because I don't know. I think that I've always thought that the humans that left Africa were probably the ones that got cast out. And I would just rather stay in Africa my whole life and not have winter ever anymore. But yeah, I think there's a lot unknown here. And I think, and ultimately it's going to be individual. And as long as you have objective metrics in your biology, whether it's body composition, energy, libido, which are, I guess they're kind of subjective, or objective lab metrics, you can see. But for me, I mean, I haven't seen any objective lab evidence that living in like endless summer is bad for me. I don't see it at fasting insulin. I don't see it at HSCRP.
Do you worry about it with like aging? With there's a lot of things we can't measure with glycation yet,
right?
Because HbA1c doesn't measure like fructose,
right?
So it's only glucose. So
it's an interesting question, because I'm not convinced about that actually. I did a whole video about it.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a whole video I did about fructose, and if you look at fructose specifically, the concentration of fructose in the human blood is so much lower than glucose that I think it's negligible. that the fructose, though it tends to glycate more in the blood, the concentration of fructose is orders of magnitude lower in the blood. And so I just don't think it's an issue. And I think aging is hard, right? Like it's such a non-objective metric. Yeah, it's just a difficult metric. You know, I'm 47, so yeah, I worry about aging for sure. But what's the proper amount of aging for me? You know, but yeah, these are all great questions. I think there's a lot more to discover there.
Yeah, and I was just as a final thing, I was just wondering, do you still have to like give blood for to keep your iron?
Yeah. So I think this is an interesting question. Someone else, I think it was you were asking me about hemochromatosis. I think humans have, you know, evolved from all over the world, and some of us may be from places in the world that we didn't have as much access to heme iron. My family is from Sicily, Germany, and Ireland. And so who knows? But I don't have hemochromatosis per se. I've done lots of blood work looking at my labs. But if I eat red meat every day for every meal, which is basically my preferred source of protein, my ferritin will go to like 250, 300. And so with that, I mean, that's not diagnosable hemochromatosis, but my transferrin saturation, which is another metric of sort of avidity for iron, is just quite high. So I've chosen to do phlebotomy just to keep the ferritin low because I'd rather eat red meat than chicken. I just find it better and more nutrient rich, and the chickens are mostly eating grains. So yeah, I think it's an individual thing, and women don't have the problem as much if they're menstruating because they're always losing blood, but men should probably be checking their ferritin, and it's very bio-individual. So yeah, it's a tricky thing to solve, but you know, phlebotomy is pretty easy.
Do you worry about that with the lack of like ferroptosis that you get from more of the summer signals versus the winter signals?
Clarify that question for me. So what do you mean by that?
Like the winter signals are giving you a lot more ferroptosis, so you're getting rid of and turning over the iron, the hemoglobin, and so then you'd be kind of breaking it down, and you don't maybe it would like help with the iron levels.
I don't think so actually, because I think that the iron is potentially triggering oxidative stress, and the ferroptosis, my sense is that that's a negative type of cell death that you don't want to encourage that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you want to encourage ferroptosis. I think that's the wrong type of cell death. And I think that the data on autophagy is still sort of, it's not fully fleshed out. Like I think that there's evidence that a lot of the nutrients that we eat on a daily basis also trigger autophagy. So I don't think that for humans to get autophagy, which is the fancy word for cellular house cleaning, I don't think we need to have a fasting state to get a full autophagy. So I've always felt like that's kind of an overly simplified narrative as well. Because if you look, I mean, there's studies that show that glucose certainly and other nutrients in our food actually trigger autophagy. There's like this idea that you don't want to be in the house when the house cleaners are there, so you fast to get autophagy. But I think that physiologically, the body is always doing house cleaning, even when we're eating. So like these idea of liver cleanses and stuff, it never makes sense to me because I think that like you can just keep eating. And if you're eating nutrient-rich food, your liver will do the process of turning things over and recycling. And I think sometimes fasting triggering more autophagy could be a negative thing because we do autophagy when cells and proteins are damaged. And so at least in the neonatal context, when there is a neonatal injury that causes cell damage, you see more autophagy because you've damaged the cell more. Yes. So if we see fasting increasing autophagy, we have to make sure this is actually a net positive because there's also the possibility, the hypothesis that the fasting triggers damage to the cell or damage to the proteins, and that leads to autophagy, which doesn't sound like a good thing either. Yeah. So I don't really believe in like forcing too much of it. I kind of just think that what you want to do is just give your body lots of nutrients and avoid toxins and let the body kind of recycle itself as it's doing its job every day. Yeah. Rather than putting too much stress on the system.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. There's a lot of different perspectives with all this. And
yeah.
Like people living a long time in Iceland versus people living a long time in the Florida Peninsula.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting just quantum biology puzzle that
we're
still figuring out.
People live a long time, a lot of places. Yeah.
That's cool.
Thank you. So that was a very technical, hopefully you guys. Let's see. I'm just getting grilled up here.
Hi, I'm Mark from Indiana. Just love this gathering.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah. So I've done I'm doing the Levels app and CGM, and I think I've picked up a relationship from doing a workout. Like I do HIIT,
right?
You know, so my baseline sugar, you know, glucose seems to be elevated after those, like, you know, 2 or 3 or 4 days after that hard workout.
Right.
I mean, is that normal, or where is a normal range? Or is a baseline fluctuating depending on, if you're doing a hard workout that stimulates muscle growth, that might be, the baseline might be different for a while until you recover from that.
What is the average or median, what's your sense of the average fasting blood sugar that you have?
Well, it's hard for me to say because I keep working out. As soon as I see the level go down to like 90 or something, I think I'm recovered now, so I'm ready to do another workout. So
Okay.
I think there's some, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's true or not,
Yes.
whether the body's calling for that glucose.
So I think that if you're seeing an elevation of your fasting blood sugar, you probably have a higher level of cortisol post-workout, which may or may not be a good thing. It may depend on how intensely you're working out. So when you go into a sauna, you will see your blood sugar go up. When
noticed that.
when you do a hard workout, you will see your blood sugar go up. This is cortisol. This is essentially hormonal signaling for gluconeogenesis in your body. You're not eating sugar. Presumably you're working out. Your body is doing the formation of sugar from a stressed state. And, stress isn't necessarily all bad for the organism, but I think that you have to individually decide what the optimal level is for you. And I think a lot of people end up over-exercising, right? And so for me, if I had a baseline blood sugar, my fasting blood sugar probably is 78, 75, or 80, which is much lower than it was when I was on carnivore. So when I was on a strict carnivore diet and keto, my fasting blood sugar would be 98, 99, 100, or 95. And you see this, people, and I'm not saying that carnivore diet isn't great. It works for a lot of people, but you will see the fasting blood sugar go up because you do have baseline levels of glucagon and sometimes cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine, which are the catecholamines, which are higher than when you have more sugar, quote unquote sugar. So what a lot of people experience is when they're carnivore and they add carbohydrates, their fasting blood sugar goes down. And their hemoglobin A1C, which is this, reasonable but not perfect metric of the average blood sugar over 90 days, usually goes down. So I think it depends how intensely you're working out. My intuitive sense would be you'd want to give your body a few days at that lower blood sugar before you do another intense workout. And see if that maybe helps the way you sleep, and other metrics, your weight, if you're trying to lose weight or if you're trying to maintain weight or gain muscle. I think a lot of us tend to over-exercise, right? We think that we just have to work harder, and that indication of a higher blood sugar is a pretty good indication, like, hey, you're right on the edge maybe of even training too much. I wouldn't want that fasting blood sugar to be too high for too many days after your workout. I would hope that it would come back to normal within 24 hours.
Well, I do these, what they call super slow. It's like a real high intensity, slow movement. And you just go to ultimate failure. I mean, and it's like, it only takes 20 minutes, but I mean, I'm juiced that. I mean, I'm completely exhausted, and it might take 3 or 4 or 5 days, up to a week to recover from that one workout.
That sounds pretty intense.
And so, yeah, I don't think a lot of people do this kind of thing, but I think with the body, get to a certain level, like if you get a 10% body fat, and then where, you probably don't want to grow any more muscle. I mean, it depends on
the individual. For me, I'm not trying to grow any more muscle because I want to be able to surf and do other things that require mobility and speed. And I'm not trying to get super huge. But I think that, if you're seeing a fasting blood sugar that's elevated for a week or 5 days, you might be going a little too hard. Working out does not cause weight loss. This has been pretty clearly shown in the literature. Working out is not the way to lose weight. If you work out, generally we tend to eat more to compensate for the calories we burned. Working out is very good for your brain. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, and these other compounds are elevated post-workout. It feels good to work out. Our bodies need movement. It's part of being a healthy human, but it's not to lose weight. Losing weight, I think, happens, and this is something I was talking to some of you guys this gathering about. Losing weight happens with the food quality that you eat, primarily because that affects your basal metabolism. We have so many more hours in the day of a basal metabolism, and that's the free calories, right? Calories in, calories out, sure. I think it's an equation that's very misleading and kind of a psyop for people, because when you say calories in, calories out, you get Weight Watchers. and people don't think about food quality. And what I will say very clearly and strongly, a hill that I will die on, is that the quality of the calories you put in determine the calories out. And the calories out is super important. Now, I would argue even more important than the calories in, because I think that we see people who improve the quality of their diet and pay zero attention to calories and end up losing weight and feeling better, becoming more fertile, all these kind of things. So I think that if weight loss is the goal, the answer is improve food quality and just get really intense on that. And I would experiment. My advice would be experiment with less often for workouts that are that intense, or dial it back 30, 40% and see if you can maybe not create so much of a stress response after your workouts, and see how you feel with that.
Well, I don't know how accurate these like in body where you stand on the thing and
the scans, yeah.
But I noticed when I was just doing keto and carnivore, I wasn't only losing fat, but I was losing muscle too.
Okay.
And I'm like, that's where I triggered. And I looked at yours first and I'm like, I can't eat like that because all these doctors were scaring away from any kind of spike.
Sure.
And then I went back to you and I'm like, because I was dehydrating and I couldn't get enough water in me. And I'm like, then I got gout. And then, I'm like, why am I getting gout? Well, I might've been too many saunas, I think, or something. I'm guessing maybe on that. But it's like, that's where I went back to you and I started listening close. It's like, that recipe seems to be what would supply the muscle back to its, 75% of muscle is water, hydration. So I'm like, if I'm not getting the signal for that, I'm not going to be able to absorb the protein that I'm eating. Possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, and if you don't get enough insulin signaling at the level of the kidney, you won't hold on to electrolytes. And so that's the problem a lot of people run into with keto. And you can take 20 grams of salt per day and still have electrolyte issues. So it's going to be individual, and I think it depends on the gut and a lot of factors for most people. But I think that I don't see any problems with fructose from fruit or honey. I've never seen studies suggesting that's a problem for humans. And I think that carbohydrates are generally beneficial for most people. And most people actually see most metrics improve when they add carbohydrates. There are exceptions to the rule with people who have pre-existing gut issues like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, who may not tolerate certain types of carbohydrates. But I think that I see carbohydrates now as a signal of abundance for humans. And most of us would like to be abundant for our lives. And then, that's to the earlier question, there remains this hypothesis that maybe we don't want to have abundance all the time. But I feel best in my life when I'm sort of eternal summer and always having abundance, and giving myself carbohydrates on a daily basis feels better.
Hey, what's up, Paul? My question is, can you wiggle your ears?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, wow. Okay, is it okay if I ask a real question?
Yeah, I'm trying. I don't think I can wiggle my ears. Can you?
Yeah. See that? He's not lying.
I can't do it.
Okay, so my question is, I wrote it down. Do you think it's truly feasible to scale pasture-raised cattle production to meet the nutritional needs of a global population?
I like this question. My buddy Mike in the back is appreciating this question. Apparently, Andrew Huberman had Christopher Gardner on his podcast recently. And Christopher Gardner is a well-known vegan at the Stanford Center for Veganism Propaganda. Stanford Center for Veganism Research, or I don't know what he is. They did a movie about twins and vegan diets that was pretty horrible. And so Christopher Gardner this vegan advocate did not believe that regenerative agriculture was scalable. What's interesting, have you ever been to a regenerative farm?
Yeah.
So when I've been to these farms, a couple of farms have done kind of the same thing. They have me look at a piece of grass that's like 1 foot by 1 foot. And it's almost like hair follicles, right? You can see on the soil how much of the soil has grass growing out of it. How thick is the hair on your head? How many follicles per square inch? Well, how many follicles of grass do you get on a piece of land per square inch? What's interesting about regenerative agriculture, which is agriculture where animals, presumably cows and other ruminants, are eating the grass, pooping and peeing there, and then being rotated between fields, recapitulating the way that ruminant animals like bison have lived in the grasslands of the United States and other countries for millions of years. When you do that, the soil is enriched in carbon. It goes from 0.5 to 5% carbon. And more carbon in the soil is taking carbon from the atmosphere into the soil. And then you get more productivity of the soil. So if you do any of these calculations about how much land is needed for a cow, and they're based on land that is not regeneratively raised, you're looking at somebody that's balding, right? You're looking at land without a lot of hair follicles. But I think that it's pretty clear that if you raise cattle on land regeneratively, you can really regrow the hair on that land. You can increase the grass density. And a lot of regenerative farmers that I know say they're grass farmers, right? They're grass farmers and they happen to have cattle on the grass, which is really true because if you are talking about regenerative agriculture, we're talking about ruminants and we're talking about how much grass does it take to feed a cow, which is what they're supposed to eat, and how many cows can we put on a piece of land based on that amount of nutrients coming from the grass. So I think that it's quite possible. It's a bit of a, in the way that Christopher Gardner was framing it, it's a bit of a straw man because look, the whole world is never going to not, the whole world is never going to be a carnivore. The whole world is never going to eat 2 pounds of meat per day. And I think that just because I'm advocating for people to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and I think that that creates a lot of human health for both men and women, doesn't mean that we should say that's not sustainable until we run into that problem. Like let's create a problem of human health. Let's create a problem where humans are so healthy, and then they'll be smart enough to solve it. But I think that within that problem is this sort of exponent or this other factor that isn't being accounted for, that like when you raise cattle on land, that land becomes more fertile and more grass is grown there, and you can raise more cattle on land when it's been regeneratively raised or farmed for multiple years. So it's a complex question. The other thing to consider is that in the United States alone, I believe there are millions of acres of land in this conservation reserve program, and farmers are paid to leave that land fallow because it's been so stripped by monocrop agriculture. And so anytime we ask this question, we have to ask sort of the corollary question is monocrop agriculture scalable? Yeah. And the answer to that is clearly no, because if you try and grow any single plant on land, you run into a real problem with the fertility of that land. And that is the reason farmers in the United States are paid to leave land fallow in this conservation reserve program, or they're paid to not graze or grow anything on the land. And it takes decades in many cases for that land to return to fertility. And so I think that all of the land in the conservation reserve program, which is, I believe, millions of acres, could be used for cattle, because cattle can go on land that is much too steep to grow. Monocrop agriculture, you can't farm this. There's a lot of farms here in Costa Rica where cattle are on very steep hillsides that you could never till, you could never put a tractor on that land. And so a lot of the land across the world is not even suitable for plant agriculture. So I think that there's a lot more to this equation than people are making it out to be. I think that regenerative agriculture is much more scalable than people think it is. And I think ultimately, why don't we start with human health and try and create healthier food for humans that is also better for the planet? That's unquestionable. And then see where we get to. I don't think we don't go down the path which we know leads to better outcomes for human health and prosperity because we're worried about some outcome that we haven't really gotten to yet. And especially when the other pathway is horrible, right? Monocrop agriculture is not what we want to do across the world either. And the idea that I think Christopher Gardner and others in the plant-based space, who I respect, is to look, and I've had other people on my podcast that have echoed this sentiment. The problem with our world is not necessarily calories, it's nutrients. And so we can give a lot of calories to people on this planet that are really, really low quality foods, really, really low quality grains. And we're going to get a lot more humans who are very nutrient deprived. I would much rather make sure that we're trying to solve the problem of nutrients rather than the problem of calories when it comes to feeding humans and creating sustainable systems. And I just don't think you solve the problem of nutrients starting with monocrop plant agriculture. I mean, some plants, great, you've got some nutrients, but you just cannot compare that to a cow or a ruminant animal in terms of nutrient density. It just doesn't compare. Okay. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Was that okay, Mike?
But yeah, just to put it simply, there's billions of acres of unused grazable land all over the world. And if we just simply had a program to use it,
right,
and graze that land with ruminants like cattle, sheep, goats, bison, whatever is best for that region of the world, we could feed the world probably 10 times over. Like, it's really that simple. And all the while improving the ecosystem, improving the soil, improving every % carbon increase in the soil, allows, 100% infiltration of rainwater, which recharges the aquifers, and pretty much everything improves.
Everything gets better.
Like there's more insects, there's more birds of prey, the entire ecosystem improves, and we feed people more nutritious food.
And the flip side is monocrop agriculture, which worsens every one of those metrics.
Yeah.
So there's no question what we should do here. Thanks, brother. All right, who's next?
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
So I think one of the greatest struggles for people who eat like this and want to eat like this is there's nowhere to eat out. And I've been in food and restaurants for 15 years. I've owned my own business, and the bottom line and the margins are so small in restaurants that it is so difficult to justify when you're the owner how to make something work, how to make it a little bit healthier. And so I guess what I'm wondering is I think, I know the ideal restaurant that I would want to build, but your average restaurant owner, your average chef is exhausted, they're stressed, they're tired, they're just trying to keep their business alive. So what do you think the best levers for them are to pull to, if they do want to make a change, what's the greatest ROI? What's the greatest ROI lever that they could pull? And how can we convince more small business owners and restaurant owners to make changes that will better help the consumers?
Yeah, I think that availability of food is important. I think that when I talk to people in the world, one of the biggest stumbling blocks for people is convenience. And I think that first and foremost, I kind of think that don't let convenience be the death of you. Convenience is often the end of many of us. And that's why with companies like Lineage and Heart and Soil, we've tried to make healthy sources of food more convenient. I mean, I took Lineage meat stacks to the White House because I wanted to give them to people there, because there's obviously no good food at the White House, and the White House cafeteria cooks with seed oils. But we're going to try and change that. And so, yeah, where are people supposed to eat when they are in their lives and they don't have time to bring it all with them? And so I think there's different levels to solve this problem, right? There's the level of the fine dining restaurant. And if you're going to a nice restaurant, those kind of restaurants, I think, can appeal to certain consumers just by having higher quality foods. And most people are not going to fine dining restaurants when they're on the go.
It's a disaster in fine dining restaurants. The plastic use, it's just 4 days of stuff marinating in plastic, covered in grapeseed oil.
Yeah, this is the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And then it costs you $400.
Yeah. So I think that, in this group, when I go to a nice restaurant, which is very rarely, I'll just ask them, is it marinated and do you cook with seed oils? And most of them do have at least one steak on the menu that they're willing to cook for me on a grill that doesn't have seed oils. I was at a restaurant in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night, and it was pretty incredible. We got some video of this. It was Jimmy's idea, but we had some Lineage tallow, and I just asked the guy, what are your steaks cooked in? And usually they say, oh, they're just cooked on a grill. But he said, no, they're cooked in vegetable oil. And I said, first thing is it's seed oils. That vegetable oil is just a euphemism. And second thing, will you cook in this tallow? And to my surprise, the guy said, yeah. So the whole table, Gary Brecka, a whole bunch of my health friends, the whole table got steaks cooked in this tallow. So I don't know how scalable that is. I'm sure it violated OSHA standards.
No, I have a bottle of coconut oil, virgin coconut oil at a Thai restaurant I go to with my name on it.
Yeah, if it works.
I just asked.
If it works, right? And I think that a lot of humans, look, if your friends think you're weird for doing this type of thing and intentionally swimming upstream with regard to your health, find new friends. There was this men's group mastermind was here the other night, and they asked me, as an aside, they said, what do you think of alcohol? And I said, I think it's garbage. And we know that even small doses of alcohol per week, one drink per night, average per week, thin the neocortex of the brain. And look, if you want to have a little bit of alcohol every once in a while, but realize that we're all intelligent enough and charming enough and good looking enough to court a mate and, court our spouses and have a fun time without alcohol. And I just think it is just another one of these psyops. I don't think alcohol makes our lives any better in any way, shape, or form. And so, these were young guys too. So I was being a little bit blunt with them and saying, get rid of alcohol. And if your friends don't like you or you find stress with your friends because they want you to drink, then get new friends. And those friends are kind of garbage friends anyway. And I'll stand by that position. And I'm not going to judge anybody here if you want to have a glass of wine every once in a while, but realize that alcohol is a toxin for the body, full stop, end of story. It's not to say that I'm perfect. I don't drink alcohol at all, but I'm not a perfect human either. So every once in a while we all, go off the rails. But I think that if your friends, are looking sideways at you because you're bringing coconut oil to a restaurant, or they're saying you're weird, you're bringing tallow, or I just hate this social norm that, I don't like people that are picky eaters. It's shut up, like it's not like I'm smoking. I'm making an intentional choice for my health. And if you don't like that, like it's time to find new friends. There's your signal that you need to upgrade your friend group, find people. That's what this gathering is about, guys. I mean, I've had a lot of you guys tell me over the course of the weekend, it's so nice to be around people here where nobody is thinking I'm weird because you guys are just eating steak, or you're just eating steak and squash, or you don't want to eat junk food. And I hate this idea that within our culture, it's become cool to eat junk food. And certain age groups might have more of this than other age groups. And maybe as we age, we find friends who understand the ROI better than we did as young men and women. But I think find people in your life who support your decisions and be radical in these restaurants. And I think that's a way that we do it. That, you see Seed Oil Scout having this Seed Oil Scout approved. And it's people like us who go to restaurants and ask, do you cook in seed oils, that make the chef think, maybe I should stop cooking in seed oils. And that makes the change. When the consumers want that, restaurants will change. And then I hope that as the level, at different levels of restaurant eating, there will be more options. I'm working on a fast food restaurant chain, and we'll see where it goes, that cooks grass-fed burgers in tallow. I know I've had friends that have tried to do the same concept. So there are those of us in the world that are trying to make fast food affordable and also really good quality, but we'll see. I think that a lot of this comes down to convenience and preparation. But when you're in a bind, there are options out there to like do the least harm. And I think for me, I don't know if this is what you're asking, but for me, if I'm in a bind, I'm going to try and find a restaurant that cooks a steak without seed oils, and I'll just get a plain steak with salt and I'm good.
But if I'm a restaurant owner and I want to make a change, but I don't have the financial ability to make all the changes, what one change should I be making to help my customers the most?
I think getting rid of seed oils is the place to start and send the signal out, right? And I think you will attract clientele that appreciate that. I mean, there's a restaurant here in Uvita called Sebas, and they're seed oil free. And look, I think that's a selling point for them. And Segura's says the same thing. The butcher that sort of catered this whole gathering here in Uvita, they're seed oil free. So I think if you send the signal out, you will attract people that appreciate that.
So this might be a little controversial, but Bryan Johnson claims that seed oils are good for you. And I know that when
I've never heard of it.
I know when I eat seed oils, I feel terrible. I'm out for like half a day.
Right.
So there's no way that he can feel good eating seed oils. And he's also a vegan by choice.
He is a vegan by choice.
I think that the veganism is attributing to his longevity because he's trying to anti-age backwards, I guess.
No, I don't think. One of the more interesting rabbit holes or theses that I've talked about or thought about in the last few years is the idea that meat ages us. And when you look at meat specifically, there are so many nutrients in meat that are uniquely associated with longevity that it's just hard for me to believe that the summation of those nutrients would be bad for us or cause you to age faster. So I'm talking about nutrients like taurine, which is really only found in meat and is especially found in red meat and organs and especially rich in heart. It's partially degraded by cooking, but we still get some when we cook our meat. And I mean, taurine has been studied across species and found to be associated with longevity. So you can also look at coenzyme Q10, vitamin B12, creatine, vitamin K2. All of these nutrients are uniquely found in meat. And if you look at Bryan Johnson's stack, if I knew who that was, you would find many nutrients in his stack that are found exclusively or predominantly in animal foods. Whether it's taurine, whether it's creatine, whether it's other amino acids, these are animal-based nutrients that he's taking because they're beneficial. I mean, one of the best lines that I've come up with my team recently is that things like creatine and collagen are so valuable that even vegans take them, right? And so it's like, look, there's no such thing as vegan collagen, by the way, guys. I saw that in a store in Santa Teresa once, and I thought, this is just garbage. There's no such thing as vegan collagen.
I used to work at a vitamin shop, and we sold vegan creatine, and it made no sense.
What is vegan creatine?
It's bullshit.
It is bullshit. It's absolutely bullshit. And so I think that meat, that there's also, just high level, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that meat is associated with longevity. Some of the most long-living cultures or societies consume lots of meat. So just at so many levels, the idea that meat ages us doesn't make sense to me. And that's been a series of things that I've tried to debunk over the years. So I don't think we should fear red meat. On the seed oil thing, I think that Bryan is parroting what his team is telling him. And they're basically, I don't think he wrote that tweet. I've done a FaceTime call with Bryan Johnson. And, I actually should have called him out on that during the call. And But maybe in the future. I mean, he's open to dialogue, to his credit. I still am not convinced that his program works well for most people. And we sort of saw that with the BP 5000 data. There was this Blueprint 5000 data that he did a study on. A lot of it was hidden. He never actually released the data. I think that for most people, when you go vegan, and especially when you go calorie restricted, time restricted feeding vegan, you're going to see your hormones crash. And so I think that what he's doing, maybe it works for him because he has some magical concoction of 103 pills a day, or he has other gene editing things that he's not telling us about. But I think it doesn't work well for really any other human on the planet. And I just find his stuff a little bit disingenuous, which I will tell him to his face, and I'm happy to debate him if he's willing to do it. But I think that meat and longevity, those two things go together. I don't see any solid evidence that meat is going to shorten our lives, and I think that his seed oil stance is just bullshit. It is bullshit. It's very flaky and it's very thin, and I don't think he could defend it in a debate because I don't think he's read any of those studies, and I think he's just parroting what other people have said. And I think his team wrote that tweet, and Bryan Johnson doesn't eat seed oils. Why are you defending them? Olive oil is not a seed oil; it's a fruit oil. So yeah, we'll see. He actually texted me the other day and said maybe he would come to Costa Rica. So we'll get some video of it. I'm not sure how he will fare here. He will. He might get burnt, and I'm gonna throw him off a cliff and see how he does. I'm not sure Bryan Johnson would jump off my roof. We'll find out.
What's up, man?
What's up?
Awesome, dude. So I have like a little bit of a three-part question. I do a lot of content, and I like to introduce a lot of people to cold plunge, sauna, contrast therapy. I'd love to know what your take is on all three, but a little more specifically on saunas, traditional versus infrared.
I think that all of us have some sort of allostatic load, which is this idea that like we all carry a stress load, and saunas are stressful. You can use that to your advantage, or you can use it to your detriment if you overuse it. So my friend Gary Brecka talked about putting his aged parents, I think his parents are in their 80s, and they're actually not ambulatory. So he can put them in the sauna and get them a workout, quote unquote, without actually having them move. And it's true. I think this is the benefit of sauna for people that are kind of sedentary or not super active, is that you're getting a low-level workout. When I was in my residency in Seattle, I used to go to a gym there called SBP, Seattle Bouldering Project, and we called it the VIP workout or the executive workout. You just go in the sauna. You don't actually go work out or do anything. You just go in the sauna. And I mean, I'm living in Seattle. I know there's a few of you guys from Seattle here. Living in Seattle, it was nice to have warmth sometimes. So I would do the executive workout occasionally. But I think that it's easy to overuse sauna because if your allostatic load is already high and you're already doing jujitsu and hitting the punching bag and doing HIIT workouts and throwing kettlebells around and swimming and maybe not sleeping a ton because your kids are young or something, and you try and throw sauna on top of that, you're just not going to get a net benefit, I don't think, for humans. I think that there are unique benefits to sauna, perhaps in terms of detoxification, but I don't think there's anything magical about it, right? I think the Finnish studies that we see for sauna are like, it's interesting for me to think how much exercise are these guys getting in Finland, and are these humans that are just basically the only exercise they're getting is the sauna? Well, yes, if you're going from 0 to 1 and you're getting the equivalent of a few walks per week, you're going to see a massive longevity benefit to sauna. Does that mean sauna benefits you, right? In terms of longevity, if you are already lifting weights, if you're already doing, if you're already running 6 or 60 miles a week, it's a hard call. And I think we have to be honest about that. And I feel like this sort of unqualified prescription for people to do sauna for longevity doesn't make sense to me. But I think that you have to do it in your own life. And I think you will see, if you look at sauna, that it will elevate your stress hormones, like cortisol. It will elevate your fasting blood sugar. And I've been experimenting with an Oura ring. I have no association with them, but I definitely see my HRV go down, right? So HRV is heart rate variability. Generally, it's a high level indication of readiness or recovery, and you want that to be higher. When you guys are here in Costa Rica, I think your HRV is probably going up because you're in an environment where you're not stressed, you're sleeping. Hopefully you're exposing yourself to infrared. We're around infrared light. This is a good thing to see the HRV go up. I think as a society, we are overstressed and overtrained. And so when you see the HRV go down, you think, oh, that's maybe not a good thing. And so, I went to a gym in Miami and I did a couple of days of sauna with cold, and my HRV went down, noticeably down. Now, I didn't continue that. Maybe it would have recovered, and I'm curious what other people have experienced, but just keep those factors in mind. Now, when you add cold plunge, it gets interesting for me. I'd like to do sauna and cold together. I like to do contrast therapy just because of the way it feels on my brain. I don't like to do cold plunge by itself. And if you do cold plunge by itself, you should do it before your workout and not after your workout. And so I don't mind doing sauna and cold plunging every once in a while. It can be a social thing. It's fun. And especially, so I might do something like, I don't know, 180 degrees in the sauna for 15 minutes. Then you get in a cold plunge for a couple minutes and you go back in the sauna. And I think a lot of people do too much of the cold plunge with the contrast. Yeah. When I was hanging out with Gary Brecka, he likes his cold plunge at like 52, 53, which I like that temperature. I had a very cold plunge at my house here and I actually sold it. I'm gonna get another one, but I used to keep it at 34 because I love the ice. And you're like, look at how badass I am. I got this really icy sauna. You have to break the ice. And I just don't think that's necessary. I like a 52 degree cold plunge. So if you're gonna do that, that's great. It certainly will change the neurotransmitters in your brain. You'll get more dopamine, you'll get more catecholamines, but what is it doing long-term to your recovery? Is it overstressing you long-term? Keep those things in sort of in terms of consideration, because ultimately we're all just trying to be as healthy as possible. And I think that no matter what you're doing, you always have to qualify it in the context of your own life. And sometimes you could overfill the bucket or put yourself over the edge. And was there a third part to your question?
Yeah, on the sauna, if you had to choose.
Oh, yeah.
If you were going to be doing it, would it be traditional? We pour some water on the rocks.
I like that.
Over infrared?
Yeah, I like that.
Any major reasons why?
It just feels better. It's hotter, you know? Yeah, but I think that infrared light is valuable for humans. But you are getting a lot of infrared light even in a hot rock sauna because it's heat. And so that there's a huge amount of infrared in there. So one of the cool things about being in Costa Rica is we're getting a ton of infrared light because we're outside. I did a podcast with my buddy Tristan Scott, and he really opened my eyes to this idea of infrared light deprivation and infrared light deficiency in humans. I did not know until I talked to him that the mitochondria in our whole body, not just in our eyes or our brain, use infrared light to make melatonin and use that as sort of a systemic store of an antioxidant in our body. And so you can think one of the probably the most damaging things that we could do for ourselves is sit indoors in an office behind glass all day. You're getting no infrared light. So it would be interesting to compare the amount of infrared in an infrared sauna versus an actual Finnish sauna. But just personally, I prefer the Finnish sauna.
Totally. And would you say that time and temperature would absolutely make the difference?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you could experiment with it and see what works best for you and see how you feel. Yeah. I think that sweating is valuable for humans. We use our sweat glands to do a lot of detoxification and we want to sweat. I just think be careful. Don't overuse either of them.
And then last part of the contrast therapy part. Do you think that by going from sauna to cold plunge, the time and temperature, obviously we talked about that, but do you think there's any potential risks to somebody just jumping into contrast therapy?
Well, certainly if you have pre-existing cardiovascular disease, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely going to put a stress on your heart. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Thank you, brother.
Hey, Paul, thanks for getting us all out here.
Thanks for being here,
It's been
man.
a great experience.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so based off cardiovascular disease, kind of how you finished the last conversation, obviously when you go into an animal-based or a carnivore diet, you're eating a lot more saturated fats and a lot more red meat, and that kind of scares a lot of people and a lot of modern physicians.
Right.
How would you approach a conversation with a family member who has high risk for cardiovascular disease, sees transformation in someone like myself, and is kind of worried about their cholesterol levels increasing when they have other metabolic markers that are not so healthy?
So they're worried about your cholesterol?
No. For like approaching a conversation with them, right? So they're like, well, red meat's bad, my cholesterol's high. And I know your thoughts on high cholesterol with those that have good insulin sensitivity,
right?
But with those that have other, metabolic markers that are not so great.
Yeah, so I think it's contextual, right? Are they willing to make other changes? Are they willing to understand why they're metabolically healthy in the first place or metabolically unhealthy in the first place? And so from a cardiology perspective, I think to get lipids or to look at lipids without any contextualization, like a fasting insulin or anything that gives you a sense of metabolic health is just, malpractice. But most doctors do it that way because that's the way we've been taught. So I think that you cannot interpret blood lipids unless you know someone's metabolic health and probably hormonal health. I think that the other piece of the equation that we should probably add to that is show me a thyroid panel and show me a fasting insulin. And doctors never do that. Now, it sounds like you're talking about having a conversation with family members, and presumably their fasting insulin may not look that good because they're already unhealthy. And so the thing is that I believe if they switch to an animal-based diet, very quickly their fasting insulin is going to get better. And so the question is, are they just going to eat more meat and keep eating seed oils and do, not do any of these things to improve their metabolic health? or are they actually going to embrace this wholeheartedly? I don't think meat is harmful for humans. I happen to believe that ApoB containing lipoproteins are not atherogenic in and of themselves. And I think that anytime you look at studies that qualify or contextualize atherosclerosis risk on the basis of insulin sensitivity, you see the relationship between ApoB and cardiovascular disease either massively attenuated or you see it kind of vanish. So I think that most of Western medicine is treating all people kind of the same and is assuming that everyone is insulin resistant, which is a fair assumption, but I think that we need to qualify that. And I think the goal should not be to lower ApoB in isolation. The goal should be to improve insulin sensitivity. And none of these therapeutics in Western medicine will achieve that because you have to get to the root cause. And I think that if we're not focusing on improving insulin sensitivity, what are we doing? We're just kind of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Certainly you can maybe reduce your cardiovascular risk if you've already had a heart attack by taking a statin, but at what cost? Long-term mortality benefits to statins are, it's just questionable when you look at all-cause mortality. Some studies say yes, some studies say no, depending primary prevention versus secondary prevention. Your question was, how do you approach the conversation with a family member? I think that the first thing you do with family is you show them, you don't tell them, and you show them that you're healthy and you're thriving. Maybe you could show them that you have a CAC scan or a CT coronary angiogram that looks good. And maybe you could assess like their level of readiness to change. How much are they willing to do? Because I think that ultimately it depends how much they're going to embrace the lifestyle, because I'm not sure that if you're just going to eat more meat and you're not going to change other things, that's going to be we don't know what that's going to do to you, right? I'm not sure that's going to be harmful for you. Your cholesterol might go up, but then again, if you're eating the seed oils, maybe your cholesterol will stay low. I think your oxidized LDL will go up. And I think that hopefully if they're asking you these questions, they will be able to embrace it more fully. And again, it's very simple, right? It's like, hey, just do a trial, try a month of meat, don't fear red meat, get rid of the seed oils, eat less processed foods, and see how you feel. And I think most people, once they can connect it with how they feel, they think, oh wow, I'm moving in the right direction. Now, then you have to have the conversation with their physician, which gets to be a little more complicated, because as physicians, I think that we all have worked very hard to get where we are. And the downside of that is we're not always open to new information as physicians. And the onus often is on the patients and their families to provide very complex or technical information to convince the physician that if someone is insulin sensitive, maybe ApoB isn't the problem. And most physicians may not have time to actually do that sort of diligence and have the conversation. But in that case, maybe you need to find a new doctor too. Am I answering your question, or is there something else you'd like me to address?
I mean, like, have you, based on the insulin sensitivity, right,
Yeah.
and addressing the root cause of it, have you seen any changes in how physicians are practicing? And
I think more and more physicians are waking up to this. I recently did a podcast with Philip Ovadia. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon in St. Pete. And, Nadir Ali has been on my podcast, Jack Wolfson. There are more and more cardiologists that are sort of working this way. And I think more and more internists and more physicians are sort of questioning the cholesterol hypothesis. I think when we are honest with ourselves as physicians, when we have patients who are taking statins, we really cannot ignore the major side effects. And I think that if you really look at the data, there is a very legitimate conversation to be had around how we address cardiovascular disease. And I think that unfortunately there's become this fear of ApoB has become even amplified recently once it became a part of the longevity conversation. But unfortunately, I think that is not necessarily the full story, right? Because even though cardiovascular disease may be the major killer, we really have to be honest about our appraisal of if we're going to say that lowering your ApoB will extend your life, because that's just not very clear if we look at all-cause mortality, especially in primary prevention populations. Maybe in a secondary prevention population, if you've already had a heart attack, the cat's out of the bag, maybe you can make that argument. But in primary prevention populations, at least in terms of the literature, lowering the ApoB really, it doesn't necessarily improve all-cause mortality. So to say that we should all be fearing ApoB is, to me, a little bit premature. And I think a lot of those longevity conversations around ApoB go even further and recommend that we actually lower our ApoB to neonatal levels, which to me is just ludicrous. And I think, it's going to have attendant problems down the road that no one is really thinking about.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But the cholesterol piece is really the crux of a lot of this, because what happens to most of us, or many of us, is that when we shift the fat in our diet and we eat more saturated fat, consistent with the way that humans have presumably been eating for hundreds of thousands of years, when we lower the polyunsaturated fats and we raise the saturated fat, many of us do find that the ApoB goes up concordantly or at the same time, triglycerides usually go down, HDL usually goes up. So we don't see metabolic dyslipidemia, we just see LDL go up. Usually fasting insulin goes down, HSCRP goes down, people lose weight, they feel better, but because in medicine we are so myopic on ApoB, we just think, well, your ApoB went up, therefore your cardiovascular risk goes up. And that's something that I think needs to be really, really at the forefront of the conversation. If you have ApoB that is raising or going up, and by this I mean LDL, which is essentially ApoB plus VLDL and maybe LP little a, and that's going up, but your ox LDL is going down, your triglycerides are going down, your HDL is going up, and your fasting insulin is going down. Do you really have a higher cardiovascular risk? And does that make any sense evolutionarily or historically? I would argue that it doesn't, and that you probably don't have a higher cardiovascular risk. And then we get to this interesting question, which is why does LDL go down when we're eating polyunsaturated fats in the first place? And there's some interesting evidence to suggest that perhaps that's because of increased oxidation in the level at the liver of VLDL particles. And so when we really peel back the onion, there's potential that increasing the amount of linoleic acid in your body, which is the highest, like the most prominent omega-6 polyunsaturated fat, might lower your LDL for the completely wrong reasons. That the LDL is becoming oxidized or damaged in the liver, and so the liver won't actually excrete it to the body. And so when we get honest about it, we say, okay, well, maybe that's the reason. Like the mechanism by which LDL goes up or ApoB goes up for saturated fat doesn't necessarily mean that that's a bad thing. And the mechanism by which LDL is going down when you're eating more seed oils is not necessarily a good thing. So the problem here is, of course, that most of the randomized controlled trials were done 65 years ago, and they are poorly constructed, and we don't have another trial to really show this. So it's difficult to say where we go from here, but it's interesting because most people, I believe, will have the experience where cutting out ultra-processed, refined, bleached, deodorized seed oils and eating more minimally processed animal fats makes them feel better. And so intuitively, I think we can understand that this is probably the way we should go as humans without even getting into the nitty-gritty of the research, which can be confusing. And the lens is sometimes muddied.
Hi. How are you? I wrote it all down so I know what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. So it's more of a personal health question.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm perimenopausal and I've been going through a lot of anxiety and depression for like the past few years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like new to the whole animal-based eating.
Right.
And then I always feel like I'm sick or that something's wrong. And it's sorry, I got distracted. And I was wondering if you had any advice on nutrition and supplementation to fix like anxiety and depression and perimenopause.
Okay. Okay. What's your diet like now?
I cook everything at home,
Mhm.
really, with like avocado oil or olive oil, and it's mostly meat based. Chicken, red meat, vegetables, and usually like either mashed potatoes or sweet potatoes because we have 3 kids. So
Okay.
trying to make everything together.
Okay. Do you know your genetics at all around methylation?
No.
Okay. So in terms of anxiety, if you're getting enough protein, so the first place I would start is with your food, right? So think about protein. Think about getting 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight from animal foods. So meat, milk, these sort of things. So 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. 1 pound of meat has 100 grams of protein, give or take. So for most people, that means you should eat more meat. Not everybody, but for most people, I would focus on meat. Make sure you're getting enough carbohydrates. If you're using olive and avocado, that's great. I would rather cook with animal fats. A lot of olive and avocado are cut with seed oils, but if you can find a good one, they're certainly better than seed oils. And then I think I would look at your genetics, right? And look at something like methylation. It gets a little complicated. You can look at an enzyme called MTHFR, or you can just empirically do a trial of taking methylated B vitamins. So I think most people should try this. They're pretty safe. You want a methylated B vitamin that has methylfolate, around 1 milligram of methylfolate, probably 600, give or take, milligrams of TMG, some riboflavin, some B6, and some methylcobalamin or adenosylcobalamin. A lot of, I think, neuropsychiatric things are solved with certain unique nutrients, and some of us have genetics that affect that. Make sure you're getting enough vitamin D, get outside. And I think between those things, you'll probably see a benefit. In terms of supplementation, I've seen a lot of people improve eating ovaries, women in the postmenopausal or perimenopausal or even premenopausal state. I've never seen ovaries sold at a grocery store or at a butcher. So the best place is probably Heart and Soil. We make a supplement called Her Package. I would give that one a try. And I would also check just a few baseline labs to make sure that you're not hypothyroid and that everything else is kind of good. So I would look at fasting insulin, thyroid panel, maybe some baseline markers of glucose, and maybe some, what was I thinking? Some electrolytes to start.
My DHEA or that blood marker was very high. It was very elevated.
Okay, sometimes it means you're not converting or bringing it downstream. So yeah, I mean, yeah, start with, just make sure you're getting good nutrients to start and then kind of dig in from there, but try the ovaries. Yeah, and the methylation also. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, thank you for fielding all of our questions. It's
Yeah,
rapid
yeah.
Fire. I have a big can of worms, but I'll try to be fast. Can you talk about mental health and mental clarity as it relates to switching to the carnivore animal-based diet? And I mean, we're all dealing with mental health epidemic pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
And yeah, anything you can give us, any information, what you see.
Yeah, I think that the way that we the way that we create nutrient adequacy or deficiency in our bodies definitely affects our mental state. It's so clear. And it's interesting because mainstream psychiatry doesn't really believe that the food we eat affects the way we feel. But I've talked to so many people who have reversed or improved depression, anxiety, even psychotic or semi-psychotic disorders, bipolar or borderline schizophrenia with diet. And so I think there's two sides to the coin, right? Gluten and other allergens certainly are linked to worsening of some of these things. And I think nutrient deficiencies make mental health issues way worse. And so then you have to think about nutrient adequacy. It's going to be very bio-individual. But if you look at the way that neurotransmitters are made, they require a lot of cofactors. And these cofactors are generally nutrients found in animal foods. And so at a high level, if you're thinking food, if you're eating red meat and egg yolks, you've pretty much got it covered, especially if you're eating some liver. And then from there is bio-individuality. We get to like this idea, are you converting folate in your diet to L5-methylfolate, which is the usable form of folate? You can do genetic testing. You can look at homocysteine. You want your homocysteine to be less than 8, give or take. And if it's above that, you probably need some methylation support, or you can just try a methylated B vitamin and see if it helps you. They're pretty safe. Some people do react negatively to methylated, methylfolate, but most people do fine with it. Once you get into things like SAMe, there's definitely more effects for some people that are negative, but methylated B vitamin is pretty good for most people. And then from there, you kind of have to dig in and understand, are you deficient in this or that, right? Are we iron deficient? Well, a lot of dopamine metabolism is iron dependent. And so if you're an anemic woman, you're not going to make dopamine, right? And serotonin is made with B6 and magnesium. And so once you do the basic things, which are eat red meat and nutrient-dense foods, I think red meat and egg yolks and liver are like the superfoods to start with, and you address methylation with just a simple methylated B vitamin complex like I talked about, go from there. If you still have issues, start to look at micronutrients and see if there's anything deficient, because you need all the micronutrients, and some of us just don't absorb one thing or another thing. We have bio-individuality, and it's hard to say broadly what the problem is. But I would start, with the food, then go to the methylated B vitamins, and then look at individual potential deficiencies. And when you do those things, I think you will, it's just, it's almost like a veil is lifted, right? Some days you can think like, wow, my brain actually works. And that's a really great thing. And I wish that mainstream psychiatry would go there.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you can point us to a conversation, if you see anything happening in that world, since we're short questions.
Not that I'm aware of right now, but hopefully in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, there's a lot of conversation around undermethylation. Do you have advice for overmethylators and those sensitive to B vitamins and red meat?
There is a panel from Genova, and it's a methylation panel. And if you think you're overmethylating, you'd probably want to go down that rabbit hole. And I think that overmethylation is probably other things like you were saying, and maybe other nutrient deficiencies. And I think if you're sensitive to methylated B vitamins or methylated things like this, or you're sensitive to red meat, that's where you have to dig into like nutrient deficiencies in the gut and kind of start unpacking things and figure out, why is this neurotransmitter not getting made? Why is this neurotransmitter not getting broken down? And trying to understand where that's coming from. And that can be, then you sort of are deep in the rabbit hole, right? You're looking at mold, you're looking at Lyme and co-infections. You're looking at Borrelia, Bartonella, Babesia. You're looking at nutrient deficiencies. And so you really have to kind of just, at that point, work with someone that you trust and try and go through it layer by layer, metals, and kind of go down the list.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Where will you recommend someone to study nutrition or medicine today? Or how will you study it again with what you know right now?
I think that so much of our education now is just self-teaching, right? I really get excited when people are in medical school because I think we need doctors that are thinking about this and just thinking about the root cause of health. But I think most doctors and most medical students I talk to realize you're not going to get taught anything about nutrition in medical school. So you kind of just have to educate yourself and start with good biochemistry. And then I think that there's no real one source at this point for nutrition education that I could think of. But I think that there's so much online that someone should begin to compile it. I think you could, basically go through podcast archives of your favorite nutrition and health podcaster and learn as much. It's like that line from Good Will Hunting where he's like, I got the same education as you for $5 in late fees from the library. Well, you can probably get an incredible nutrition education for basically free if you're willing to if you find a good podcast or archive. And there's definitely some good health bloggers out there that are going to explain stuff. I think you probably need some basic biochemistry knowledge, but beyond that, I think find what interests you and just educate yourself, depending whether you want to practice it in your life and you need some sort of certification. But I think educating yourself and learning for yourself is the best way because everybody thinks about it differently.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul.
What's up?
I was wondering what your thoughts are on freezing food and if we have to worry about getting our organs frozen, because I find that to be a struggle in the States.
Yeah, I think that it's probably better to get it fresh, but it's just from a logistics perspective, I think it's okay to freeze. I mean, we're just not going to get around that.
Okay.
Yeah, don't stress it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul. So it's really easy to get caught up in thinking about sleep, exercise, diet. But for me, I've realized the importance of managing stress. And so it's just a very practical question, whether it's somebody roasting us online or just the normal stresses of life, what do you do to try to manage some of your stress?
I look at the stars. You go surfing. I go somewhere where I feel small and you think, oh, none of this means anything, right? We're all really small, and just keep it all in perspective. Having a team helps if they can sort of shield you from those things. I think that as humans, we're not used to having multiple voices. We talked about Dunbar's number earlier in the podcast. This is about the size any tribe would ever be in life, right? 120, 130. And so we're not used to having more negative voices. And if there's if there's a group like this and there's one or two people who are saying negative things, you're going to pay attention. But when your audience gets to be hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people, there's going to be many, many negative voices, and you just have to sort of tune it out. It's an evolutionary mismatch because we're not used to tuning out the negative voices. So I think that if you feel like the work you're doing is helping people, you really have to put your head down and just do it. And I do find for myself that it's helpful to just keep everything in perspective and remember how small I am and okay, why am I doing this in the first place? Is it helping people? Okay, great. I'm never going to get everything right. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to get roasted, fine, whatever. But I'm small and we all die. So I'm not trying not to stress about it too much, but I don't always do great at that. I'm certainly not a paragon of that.
Hey, Paul, two quick questions. As a 54-year-old man that eats about 1.5 pounds of red meat a day, I take 10 grams of creatine and collagen. Is that enough?
It depends what kind of red meat you're eating, but yeah,
I'd say 95% of it is ground beef.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, so
Yeah.
10 grams. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other one is this year will be my first year of having a physical on an animal-based diet.
Okay.
So what test should I ask my doctor to do that give me the full scope of optimal health?
Right. Okay. You can write these down.
Yeah, that's why I brought up.
There's also I've done a couple of podcasts where I share my blood work, and you could mirror that. But you go to your physical, and a lot of us will be in this situation if we're going to conventional doctors. They're going to do CBC, Chem7, and lipids, and that's basically all they're going to do. They might do a TSH. So beyond that, I would do a comprehensive a metabolic panel. So not a Chem7, a comprehensive metabolic panel. You want to make sure you get a fasting insulin. I mean, that's probably the most important thing. If you're looking at glucose, you might get an A1C. You want to get a full thyroid panel. So you want to get TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3. You really want to know these things. You got to check a homocysteine, which gives you a sense of methylation broadly. You probably need to check hormones. Most people don't get hormones checked at their physicals, but you want to check testosterone, estradiol, prolactin, progesterone. You want to check SHBG, which is sex hormone binding globulin. And you want to check your iron. And we talked a little bit about hemochromatosis and iron overload for both men and women. So you want to get an iron panel because you don't want, as a woman, you don't want to be anemic, and as a man or a woman, you don't want to have excess iron. I mean, there was a woman that I dated when I was in my residency many years ago, and I said like, hey, let's get you 23andMe. This was before I knew they were selling the data, and horrible company. I did 23andMe and found out that I had an MTHFR polymorphism, so my methylation sort of paradigm changed when I saw that. And she came back and she had hemochromatosis. So here's at the time, I think she was probably a 28 or a 29-year-old woman, and she had hemochromatosis. And because she'd been menstruating her whole life, she was not really accumulating iron. But you better believe that if she took birth control or had numerous pregnancies, she was going to begin to accumulate iron. And if she never figured this out, when she hit menopause, she was going to get iron toxic, right? And so too much iron can cause a lot of problems for humans. And so people don't think about it for women, but postmenopausal women certainly need to think about this. So get an iron panel. That's a pretty good start. What am I missing? Yeah, get an HSCRP. I don't actually know that you need to get like anything more specific than a basic lipid panel. If you want to get NMR, you can. But yeah, I think that'll be a good start, and you can branch out from there. And the reason that I think you should do those things is because when your lipids come back a little high, you can ask your physician, well, my fasting insulin is low. What do you think about that? And you actually have one to talk about, right? You can say my fasting glucose, presumably, you could say my fasting glucose is low, my HSCRP is low, my hemoglobin A1C is low, and my fasting insulin is low. Does that change how you think about my lipids? And if they say no, you say, well, let's talk about it, because I think that you should say like, well, are you aware of any studies that actually look at the risk of cardiovascular disease in someone with an LDL like mine who is insulin sensitive? And they will probably look at you like crazy. They won't even know what to think about that statement. Yeah.
I bugged you earlier this week about Wilson's disease, and so I kind of wanted to generalize that question a little bit more for people who cannot eat organ meats.
Yeah.
What would you suggest doing to stay as clean and but also getting all the nutrients you need?
So Wilson's disease is a genetic copper overload. It's kind of like hemochromatosis is iron and Wilson's is copper. So the main thing to look out for with Wilson's is copper. And I don't think there's a lot of copper in heart. I think it's mostly liver. You could fact check me on that, guys, but I don't think, like, muscle meat doesn't have much copper at all. I don't think you have to eliminate all organ meats. It's really just the liver. And in terms of the liver, I think egg yolks are a good substitute. So egg yolks have choline, egg yolks have betaine, egg yolks have folate, egg yolks have vitamin A. And so I think egg yolks are a good substitute. I think you could be pretty healthy not eating liver because of the copper with the Wilson's and eating egg yolks. But I think you could eat some heart if you wanted to, and you can eat muscle meat because that has lots of zinc. So you don't have to avoid all the organs, just really the liver.
Okay. So you eat extra egg yolk? Is that kind of what you...
I don't think you need to eat extra egg yolk. I think you just need to eat a moderate amount of egg yolk. I mean, a couple of egg yolks a day is probably fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my second question is just, because we're all here for this foundation of yours for research, and I was kind of curious if you could tell us a little bit more specifically what kind of research you guys are working on pursuing.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So really, until my sister Mary Catherine took over the Animal-Based Nutrition Research Foundation, I didn't have a lot of energy to put into it. I knew I wanted to make a nonprofit, but now that she's sort of the executive director there's a lot more happening this year. So we've already started to kind of do some simple research projects. So there's a blog online called Momavation, and they did some really interesting stuff looking at like heavy metals and salt. And I want to repeat some of their tests because whenever we ask them like, hey, can you show us the data for your salt and heavy metals, they never show us the data. So we don't know how accurate that is. So I think some of the first studies we're going to do this year with the ABNRF are repeating that, looking at heavy metals and salts. I want to look at some meats and compare nutrient analysis of grass-fed meat versus grain-fed meat. Maybe look at glyphosate levels in some honeys or some meats and things like this. So I want to do some like consumer advocacy to help you guys navigate the food and actually fact check and have a sense of what is in the food we're eating, because we're all eating salt and we're all eating a good amount of salt. And according to the results from this blog that, from Mamabation, there definitely are salts that even I was using that could give you not insignificant amounts of heavy metals if you were eating 8 to 10 grams of that salt per day. So this is important, right? I also want to test seed oils directly, and especially fryer oil from some restaurants, and just expose some of the harmful lipid oxidation products, lipid peroxidation products in these oils just directly, and kind of do that kind of stuff. So that's the first tier of research that we want to do, is this kind of consumer thing. And if you guys have ideas for things you'd like us to do, a lot of people have tested coffees, but we could test coffees. But I just think this idea of like food safety and food quality is intriguing to me, and it's not terribly expensive. So with where we are with the foundation now, I mean, this whole gathering benefits the foundation. So just by being here, you guys are supporting our work. And I really believe that we'll hopefully be able to give you value back in exchange for that. And even more broadly, for the whole world. But if you guys have ideas of these consumer things that you want us to test, we can do that too. So, we could go as far as testing clothing and repeating some of that stuff and saying, well, what's in this and what's in that? So whatever you guys are most concerned about in your diet for the quality, we can test those things. I want to test water too. Most of us end up drinking only 1 or 2 brands of water, spring water, because there's only a couple in glass. But I think it's worth testing some of those and saying, like, how clean are these really? And what should we do here? And we could compare that to something like RO, which is really simple. We could even test RO filters. So I think that part of the mission and like the high level stuff we can do that's low hanging fruit is this like consumer reports type stuff. The next tier is a little more involved and will probably take us a year or something to get started with. But I've always had this vision, and I've talked to some of you guys about this at the gathering. I've had this vision to do a pilot study with an animal-based diet, and that requires like another order of magnitude of funding for the gathering, for the nonprofit, excuse me. But I had talked to a researcher at Utah State University about doing a pilot study with a control group. So this would be a randomized controlled trial with an animal-based diet, 30 to 60 days. Maybe having autoimmune conditions as an endpoint and getting lots of biomarkers, but that study is expensive. And so that's in the works also. And I think that's probably one of the big goals in the future, but we have to sort of ramp up the foundation from there. We also want to do more of this type of connecting people, which isn't necessarily research, but I think we can all agree it's important. So I think in the future, we want to maybe facilitate some of these animal-based meetups in towns and cities for you guys, and keep doing the gatherings at least on a yearly basis and go from there. But yeah, I'm open beyond that kind of stuff. I'm open to whatever you guys think we should be doing, because we just want to try and do good in the world. So yeah. Okay, cool. With that, I think we close the podcast. I appreciate you guys sitting through that, and I hope it was valuable. Some of the questions are complex. I think, we're all trying to navigate this. I'm still learning. I'm open to always being wrong and exploring. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've certainly changed my mind about things over the years, and had ups and downs. I mean, I started a carnivore diet. It really changed my perspective on autoimmune disease. My eczema got a lot better. And then I ended up with, electrolyte issues and all this kind of stuff. So it's very bio-individual, but I'm just trying to learn. And my hope is that I'll just continue to share ideas that I have with you guys, and we'll all just learn together, because, I think that maybe, what we're trying to do here is remember, and I've used that phrase intermittently over the course of the last few years, but I think that, if we were part of a tribe, we would have thousands of years of knowledge and wisdom kind of handed down to us. And I think that we've sort of lost a lot of that, right? And we're all different people now, but you can imagine that if we were in a tribe, we would have been told by our elders, like, use this plant, don't use this plant. This plant is medicine. This one is for fertility. When this time of year, you hunt these things, right? And so we're really trying to rediscover a lot of lost technology and information. And I think that it's nice to have clothes, and it's nice to have refrigeration. And so I appreciate technology, and you guys all came here over the ether web and, the ethers, and that brought us all together. So technology is great. I don't think we need to go back to living in loincloths, though I wouldn't mind having a couple in my closet. And I think we can try and just be modern humans that don't forsake all of the wisdom that our ancestors had, that we've really lost. And I think that's sort of trying to merge those two things is the main goal. And that's what this gathering is about. We live in 2025, which is crazy to think about, because I was born in 1977. And we're humans, but we live in a world that is not necessarily conducive to being humans. And, one of our slogans at Lineage is, eat like a human. Well, we also want to live like humans. And I think that we find ourselves with this challenge. And most of what we experience in our daily lives today is a pressure and a current to not necessarily live in a way that's compatible with our biology. And we are changing and our society's changing. But I think most of what we're working with in terms of our technology and what's inside these bodies is 10, 15, 20, 150, 250,000 years old. So we have this discordance, and that's what this is all about. We have a massive discordance in the way that we're living and what this elegant machine that all of us inhabit is expecting. So when we align those, I think that's when we really end up thriving as humans. And that's what this is all about. It's just about having more fun as a human. And we talked about this. This came out organically in the podcast, that if we want to have more fun as a human, we need health. So this is all about health, because health is the lens through which we see the world. And if we're healthier, life is just more fun. And when we're unhealthy, life is just not that much fun. And so it's hard to live that way. So that's what this is all about. That's the reason I do what I do. Bobby said this really well, Bobby Kennedy. He said, and maybe he took this from someone else. He said, when we're healthy, we have thousands of dreams. But if you're unhealthy, you only have one dream, and that's to be healthy. And a lot of you have, I think, reclaimed that dream or found that dream or helping other people do this or know someone who's had this experience. So yeah, I just think that the way forward is not complicated, but we have been divorced from a lot of what we've known in the past. And so we're all just learning, share what you know with other people, share what you've learned with me and others. And I think that this gathering is humbling, and it's been incredible to have you all here. It's gone so fast, it's crazy. It's been so quick. We were, just like yesterday, I was rolling in from San Jose, bleary-eyed and tired, but really stoked to be here with you guys. And I've been so humbled to meet all of you. I can't believe this is really happening. Like somehow I did something in the world which really wasn't me. I really believe it's just something bigger than me, to the sort of universal spirituality perspective. I've just tried to be a conduit, and sometimes I'm a better conduit than other times. Sometimes I don't sleep well and I'm a shitty conduit. And sometimes I have an idea and people find it valuable, and that's just super humbling. To think that I've done something in my life that has given you a little bit of value, or you guys, to think that you found value in this weekend is it's incredible for me. And so thank you. You've all given me a huge gift, and I hope that you've all made connections that go far beyond this. And so that's what I'll say sort of as we bring this thing to a close, is don't let this stop here. Like these connections you've made with these people are fucking valuable. Do not, sorry, there's kids around, I know, my bad. Don't, Luke, put on the earmuffs, and Michaela too. Like these are very valuable connections. Don't lose these, because you're going to go out into a world where the current is going to be a completely different direction when it is here. Right now, we are in a big school of fish and we are swimming upstream. We're just like cruising up those rapids and we're like, this is amazing. We're swimming upstream. We got this, because we're in each other's slipstream and we got this aerodynamics. And you're going to walk out of this thing tomorrow or tonight, and it's just the current's going to flip, and you're going to look next to you and you'll be like, where'd all my cool fish friends go, right? So you're going to have a struggle, but stay connected somehow. And we can think about, from the ABNRF with me and Mary Catherine and all of us, we can think, how do we do this? How do we stay connected beyond this? Because it's hard to swim upstream. It's hard to be different than other people. It's hard to bring your food to lunch at work. It's hard to walk around with glass containers in the airport. It's hard to ask the people at the restaurant whether they cook in seed oils. It's hard to do this. And so my biggest hope for us is that we will remember that there is a community here. And I mean, this community is bigger than here. Like we could have probably had 50 to 100 more people here if we really wanted to, but we had to close it because there's just not enough space. And this gathering will probably never be bigger than this. So there's a much bigger community. And this is 120 plus people who came across the world, to Central America to hang out. And so you're not as isolated as you think you are, but don't lose these connections. Lean on these people, keep these connections, because in the past, when I've done these gatherings, it's like this big high, and then afterwards there's a little bit of a letdown. You're like, where are all my people? Like, what do I do now? So if you feel that feeling, go on Discord, find people wherever you live. Hopefully hopefully most of you met someone or know someone near you at this gathering that you can reach out to, or organize a gathering. Go see someone from this gathering, go visit them. But I think that, I really appreciate Alex's question at the end, and I hadn't thought about this till this moment, but I think that one of the most important things that we can all do now is do animal-based gatherings wherever you live. You've all been to this gathering. You are cool enough. You have my certification. You can do your own animal-based gathering, guys. Like, do it. Do an animal-based meetup. Get people together. Share ideas. I think if you put this out there in your towns, my hope is that the verbiage is out there and people will know what that means, and maybe people will just be curious. But create community where you are and support each other, because that's the fear, is that there is a bit of a letdown coming. So just prepare for that. Take a deep breath and realize that, like, we've all had a really incredible experience, and this has definitely been enriching for me. You've given me, even more than I could ever give any of you by being here with me. So I'm going to have to do the same thing. You guys are all not going to be here tomorrow, and I'm going to think, where are my people? I'm going to wake up tomorrow. My sister and her children are staying for another day, so I get a little bit of like a come down. I get a little bit of like an afterburn. But I'm gonna be like, where are my people? Like, let's keep the gathering going. Let's keep this party going, guys. Like, let's just keep going for months. Like, I don't ever want you guys to leave. And so we got to figure this out. But just that would be what I would say to you. Like, take away from this weekend mostly community. That it's intentionally called a gathering. It's not a seminar. We did some podcasting. Maybe I had an idea that I shared with you. Maybe you learned something, but if you didn't, that's okay. You were in Costa Rica with humans doing human things. That's all this is about. Just do human things with humans. And we're all trying just to have more fun. So keep trying to have more fun with cool humans. That's what I've got for you guys. And keep the connection strong from this. And we'll see you next year for sure. We'll see you in April. And I hope to see you guys a lot, and we'll have to figure out how to support animal-based gatherings wherever people go. We can keep that stuff. So thank you guys for being here. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you.